If I had to characterize this gospel, it would be with something that we've probably all said as kids. Ready or not, here I come. And I think, that transcends from one generation to another. Kids seem to know the games to play. Ready or not, here I come. And so these cosmic events that Jesus is speaking about in the gospel this morning, he borrows from the Old Testament prophets. From Isaiah, from Ezekiel, from Joel, from Daniel. And what he's trying to say to his disciples is that when he comes again as judge, it's going to be an earth-shaking event. And so just as the prophets prophesied the coming judgment of God upon the nations and all those cosmic events took place, Jesus said, for that generation to pay attention, because it wouldn't be less than 40 years from his death that the judgment of God would come upon Israel itself, and that the temple would be destroyed and burned to the ground, and has not yet, even to this day, been rebuilt. And so it is a window, my brothers and sisters, for you and I to look through, that we might ask ourselves, ready or not, here I come. So it's about future stuff. Speaking of future stuff, I found some. There's a book called More Future Stuff that was written in 1989, and this is what it said. A time will come when cars will park themselves. See? And a computer will talk you through an unfamiliar neighborhood. What do you think of that? You see, so we have different kinds of prophets. And speaking of different kinds of prophets, I found this from Paul Harvey, which was written in 1965. I'm sure that most of you remember Paul Harvey. And now for the rest of the story. That's right. You're dating yourselves, That's right. And it's entitled, If I Were the Devil. Here's what he said. If I were the devil, I'd want the ripest apple on the tree. He meant the USA. If I were the devil, I would subvert the churches by whispering, do as you please. The Bible is a myth. Man has created God, and not the other way around. If I were the devil, I'd teach people to pray, Our Father which art in Washington, D.C. If I were the devil, I'd have families, nations, and churches at war with themselves until each is consumed. If I were the devil, I'd let children's emotions run wild until drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors were needed at schools. If I were the devil, I'd have judges promoting pornography as free speech rights. If I were the devil, I'd evict God from schools and courts and Congress. And speaking of if I were the devil, right on the front page of the newspaper this morning, if I were the devil, I'd use gambling to solve our economic problems. If I were the devil, I'd lure priests and pastors into misusing little boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd caution against extremes in hard work, patriotism, and moral conduct. If I were the devil, I'd promote the view that marriage is old-fashioned. 1965. You can hear a pin drop in this church right now. Because everything that he said in 1965 has come to pass. It isn't future stuff. We're living it right now. And so the Lord is coming. Ready or not, here I come. And yet, we all sat here and we sang, "The Lord is my inheritance." But for the Lord to be our inheritance, we must make the Lord the center of our lives. We must be living as the Lord commands us to live. Because when the Lord comes again, he is not coming in mercy. He's coming as the just judge. Ready or not, here I come. Speaking of future stuff and prophets, I found this. And it was written by Archbishop Fulton Sheen. Remember him? I don't know about you, but I had to sit in the living room and watch him every Sunday night. Oh, I guess you guys did too. He wrote this in 1974. And it's called "Christendom is Dead." He said this: "The world in which we live is the battleground of the church. I believe that we are now living at the end of Christendom. It is the end of Christendom, but not of Christianity. What is Christendom? Christendom is the political, economic, moral, social, legal life of a nation as inspired by the gospel ethic. That is finished. Abortion, the breakdown of the family life, dishonesty, and even the natural virtues upon which the supernatural virtues were based are being discredited. Christianity is not at the end, but we are at the end of Christendom. And I believe that the sooner we face up to this fact, the sooner we will be able to solve many of our problems. 30 or 40 years ago, from 1974, it was very easy to be Christian. The very air we breathed was Christian. Bicycles could be left on the front lawns, and doors could be left unlocked. Suddenly, all this has changed. And now we have to affirm our faith. We live in a world that challenges us, and many, many fall away. Dead bodies float downstream. It takes live bodies to resist the current, and this is our summons. We will have to begin a different church. We are for a moment on a trapeze. We are in between the death of an old civilization and culture and the swing to the beginning of the new. These are the times in which we live. They are therefore wonderful days, marvelous. And we should thank God that we live in times just like this. Someone recently reminded me that I gave a homily some years ago, and I told the story about codfish. And the gist of the story is that people who fish for cod go way out. And when they catch the cod, they put them in the tank on the boat. And they're out there for days. But the problem was that when they came to shore, what they found is that the codfish were very lethargic, lifeless, and a lot of them had died. And so they tried and tried and tried and tried to come up with different ideas and different ways to keep those codfish alive. And then finally, someone had the idea to take the codfish's natural enemy, the catfish, and put the catfish in the same tank with the cod. Well, lo and behold, when they put those catfish in that tank, they started chasing the cod, and the cod started swimming around and back and forth. And by the time they got to shore, those codfish were full of life because they'd been chased. And they had to fight to stay alive. And you know what? I think that that's what God is doing. He's sending catfish. Because we're going to have to do what Archbishop Sheen says. We're going to have to affirm our faith. You see, it's been easy to be Christian. We've had churches on every street corner. We've had our masses of convenience. We've been able to walk in and out of churches and pray anytime we want. Even today, we have a perpetual adoration chapel open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But we have to beg people so that they sign up to take an hour so that we can keep the chapel open and keep it perpetual. And yet I've been to Africa where people walk 10 miles just for the possibility of going to Mass, no guarantee. And we complain when we don't have our Mass of convenience. Archbishop Sheen said in 1974, Christendom is dead. And I think he's right. And we're living it right now. You see the sign in the front of the church? Pray for religious freedom. It's no joke. It's no joke. We're going to have to fight for these freedoms because they're going to be taken away from us. And if you don't think that's a possibility, then you're not paying attention. Ready or not, here I come.